And an argument ensued, and at some point, the defendant shot the victim multiple times. He's going to be held no bond. The court finds probable cause for the murder in the second degree with a weapon.
42-year-old Stephen Myers murdered his 21-year-old niece-in-law, Winnie Mendoza, at her Florida residence on July the 29th of 2019 after a secret 2-year affair. On the night of the attack, Myers had allegedly followed the young woman home and after parking in her driveway, angrily demanded to know where she'd been. The argument escalated, and the man eventually pulled out a gun, which he used to shoot Mendoza multiple times, killing her instantly. Myers fled the scene and returned home, where he confessed to the murder to his wife, 34-year-old Luisa Amanda Mendoza, the victim's aunt. He turned himself into the authorities later that same evening and willingly gave the police a full statement in which he admitted to shooting Mendoza. Myers indicated that he'd suspected his lover of seeing another man and murdered her out of sheer jealousy. He was held in custody without bail on a charge of second-degree murder. Number 9. Yunieski Carey Herrera. On November the 17th of 2020, Brazilian dancer Igor Ara de Souza murdered his partner, 39-year-old Yunieski Carey Herrera, at their Miami condo. Carey Herrera, also known by the stage name Uni Carey, was the 36th transgender woman to be murdered in the United States during the year 2020. Ara de Souza, aged 27 at the time, had gotten a tattoo of Carey Herrera's name on his hip only a month before the murder. While under the influence of illicit substances, Ara de Souza got into a heated argument with his partner, and after being told she'd found a better man, grabbed a knife and fork from the kitchen and stabbed her to death. Ara de Souza called 911 and immediately confessed to the jealousy-fueled killing, telling officers he'd ruined his life and deserved to be punished. He was arrested and held without bond on a charge of second-degree murder. A trial hearing was scheduled to take place in early 2023. Number 8. Lindsay Erin Collins. Lindsay Erin Collins, age 25, was shot by a sheriff's deputy in Kissimmee, Florida, after breaking into her ex-boyfriend's apartment and threatening both him and his roommate with a knife on September the 26th of 2018. She'd reportedly sent her former partner, 36-year-old Christopher Ingram, several threatening texts on the night prior to the attack, accusing him of dating another woman and stating, "I will hunt you all down. I will kill her, take her life and mine. You can watch. I don't care." After a brief altercation with the young woman, Ingram and his roommate, Kenneth Musselman, managed to flee the house and call 911. Deputy Lance Turley arrived at the scene a short time later and started to interview the victims, at which point Collins began running towards them holding a knife threateningly. Turley shot at the suspect, hitting her in the chest. Emergency services were immediately called to the house, and Collins was rushed to the hospital. After being stabilized, she was charged with 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder, armed burglary, criminal mischief, and aggravated assault. Turley was suspended from the force with pay pending an internal investigation into the shooting. Number 7. Jennifer Sessler. 46-year-old Jennifer Sessler was accused of destroying her ex-boyfriend's car in a fit of jealousy on August the 10th of 2022 in Coral Springs, Florida. Both of the vehicle's taillights were busted, and the paint was severely scratched with the word "whore" etched on the side. The victim, whose real name wasn't released to the media, reported the incident to the authorities, stating that he suspected Sessler to have been behind the vandalism. The two of them had recently broken up after dating for 3 years. Sessler had reacted angrily to a picture the victim had posted on his Facebook page with a new girlfriend. When police interviewed the suspect, she denied the accusation, claiming she'd been in Tallahassee at the time of the incident. However, she was arrested after detectives discovered surveillance footage that placed her at the scene of the crime, and she consequently faced a charge of criminal mischief. Number 6. Audrey Stevenson. Scottish woman Audrey Stevenson attacked her friend, Veronica Bannon, during her wedding reception in Linlithgow on July the 28th of 2017. The bride accused Bannon of flirting with her new husband, Scott Allen. Following a brief argument, 46-year-old Stevenson grabbed Bannon's hair and smashed her head into a door, knocking out 2 of her teeth. The couple were arrested at the scene and consequently missed their flight to Mexico, where they'd planned to spend their honeymoon. 55-year-old Allen denied any involvement in the attack, telling authorities he'd been surprised by his wife's actions. He was released after the prosecution accepted his not guilty plea. Although Stevenson initially claimed that she hadn't assaulted Bannon, she eventually agreed to plead guilty in exchange for a lesser sentence. She was fined $450 and ordered to pay an additional compensation of $400 to cover the victim's cosmetic procedures. Number 5. Tosha Strahan. Tosha Strahan, a resident of Torrington, Connecticut, stabbed her live-in boyfriend David Vasquez to death on February the 9th of 2014. 25-year-old Vasquez had attempted to break up with Strahan, informing her that he was planning to get back with an ex. An autopsy revealed that the victim died from a stab wound to the heart which punctured his aorta. Detectives discovered text messages Vasquez had exchanged with his ex-girlfriend in which he told the unnamed woman that he was scared of breaking up with Strahan. She had allegedly threatened to murder him and harm herself if he ended their relationship. Strahan, who was 24 at the time, called 911 after the attack, claiming to have accidentally injured her boyfriend. When police arrived at the scene, they found the young woman attempting to perform CPR on Vasquez. Detectives interviewed several witnesses who'd been at the residence at the time of the murder. According to testimony collected by officers, Strahan had told Vasquez, "If I can't have you, no one can," prior to attacking him. Although the general consensus among witnesses was that the stabbing had been intentional, inconsistencies in their statements delayed Strahan's arrest. In 2018, she pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter and was sentenced to 15 years behind bars, followed by 5 years probation. Number 4. Fatima Fardus. British woman Fatima Fardus of Bradford, West Yorkshire, violently attacked her boyfriend, Mirza Raza, in April of 2016 after suspecting him of being unfaithful. 29-year-old Fardus had become enraged after noticing that Raza had gotten a shave and a haircut. She reportedly believed the grooming to be proof that he was seeing another woman. She called him repeatedly throughout the day in question, leaving threatening messages and even trashed his apartment while he was at work. The couple began arguing upon Raza's return home. At one point, Fardus lunged at her boyfriend, aiming a kitchen knife in the direction of his chest. Raza stepped aside and the knife instead landed in his arm with such force that the handle broke off. Fardus attempted to grab a second knife, but the victim managed to flee the scene and contact the authorities before the violence could continue. Fardus was arrested but denied each of the charges levied against her. Much to her surprise, Raza supported her claims of innocence while testifying, stating that the stabbing had been an accident. Fardus was ultimately found guilty anyway and was consequently sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. Number 3. Gabrielle Nunez. 21-year-old Florida resident Gabrielle Nunez lashed out in violence against the father of her child after answering a phone call from his girlfriend in July of 2019. The man, who hasn't been named, had reportedly been intimate with Nunez earlier on the evening in question and had fallen asleep next to her in bed. When the victim's phone rang, Nunez answered it and was confronted by his girlfriend, who asked what she was doing in his apartment. Nunez woke the man up and began arguing with him as she placed their child in a stroller. She then grabbed a knife and lunged at him. He retreated into the bathroom and locked himself inside while Nunez repeatedly stabbed the door and shouted at him from the other side. She eventually managed to gain access to the bathroom but was disarmed by the victim and restrained on the floor until police arrived at the scene. She was arrested and charged with attempted murder and aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. Number 2. James Michael Watson. On October the 30th of 2017, James Michael Watson viciously beat up his girlfriend's dog named Brooklyn in Salisbury, Maryland. Having grown jealous of the attention it received from her, Brooklyn, a bulldog, suffered injuries to her left eye, nose, and the top of her head, but fortunately survived the attack. The dog was treated at Healing Hands Animal Hospital, while Watson was arrested by officers who responded to the scene. He was charged with 2 counts of animal cruelty as well as malicious destruction of property. In October of 2021, Watson was convicted of his charges and consequently sentenced to the Department of Correction for a term of 1 year and 1 day. Number 1. Armando Barron. On September the 19th of 2020, 32-year-old Armando Barron lured his wife's lover, Jonathan Amaro, into a lethal trap after discovering evidence of their affair. Barron caught his partner, 33-year-old Brittany, exchanging flirtatious texts with the victim, who was aged 25 at the time. He subsequently posed as his wife and arranged to meet Amaro at Wayside State Park in Rindge, New Hampshire. Upon Amaro's arrival, Barron forced him into a car before gunning him down. The autopsy report revealed the presence of defensive wounds on the victim's arms and hands, indicating there was some sort of physical struggle in the moments before the shooting. According to Brittany's testimony, Barron violently beat her and forced her to drive over 190 miles to a remote campsite, while he followed behind in another vehicle. When they got to their destination, he allegedly pressured Brittany into beheading her lover's corpse and disposing of the body. Fish and Game officers discovered the remains several days later. Brittany agreed to testify against her husband and pleaded guilty to 3 counts of falsifying evidence. Barron was ultimately found guilty of 13 counts, including criminal solicitation for murder and assault, kidnapping, and first-degree murder. Presiding Judge Elizabeth Leonard sentenced the culprit to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 45 to 135 years. Thanks for watching. Would you rather date a 10 out of 10 who is overly jealous and possessive, or a 7 out of 10 who isn't? Let us know in the comments section below.